Hi, Dennis.
Hi,
I thought
Shelby.
Hi, nice to see you. I'm so glad.
Likewise.
I'm so excited to kick off our Careers Unwrapped podcast series. This is definitely a big step for us, something that we've talked about for a long time at Career Sandwich.
Yep.
But felt like, it was finally time to start having these conversations, which you and I have what feels like all day, every day. But
Yes.
clicking record and starting to bring our audience along the journey too, because I think there's so much that we see and hear about that so many other people could benefit from. And so I'm really excited to kind of take these big, gnarly topics that people experience in their professional
Mm.
lives and start to break them down and have real interesting, no BS conversations about this kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm really
I
excited.
I totally agree with you. I think it's a long time coming. I think it's going to be a great medium and vehicle to really just reach the masses related to our mission, and just
Yeah,
so much to talk about. And sometimes it's just easier to get it out in this format. So it's gonna be a
totally.
good time.
Totally. Well, I always like to assume that folks know little to nothing about Career Sandwich, given we are still very early in our Career Sandwich adventure. So I feel like we should probably start with intros. Do a quick
Sure. Yeah.
hello. You want to kick us
Yeah.
off?
I will, yes. So I'm Dennis. So I'm one of the co-founders of Career Sandwich. So really, the journey of getting to this point we'll go into later, but for me, there's a lot of reasons that this is becoming one of the most exciting things I've ever worked on in my career. And I think it comes back to the two things I love the most, which is people, design, and bringing those things together in a way that super intentional. My background is design. That I did end up in the people space, which is a whole nother podcast we could talk about. Like, how do you get to this interesting like pivot in your career? But um, I love trying the best that I can. Me and my life partner and work partner Julie, who is also part of this career
Mhm.
sandwich journey, try to design our life with intention. And I think that's something I hope everybody can get to at some point in their life or in their career, is a place where at some point they can make a choice for themselves. And I'm not naive to the fact that that doesn't happen from day one, but somewhere in your life, I hope you can get there. So I hope, by sharing the things that I've learned as a designer, using this as a medium to bring those practices to someone's career, I think is really interesting to me. So we have a lot of work to do, but so far this has been quite the journey, and really the most rewarding work I've done to date, I think. So
I love that. I love that. I feel similarly. Obviously a bit of a different background than you. I went to school for marketing, always thought that that's the space that I wanted to play, and kind of happened upon the people space and HR, and with a real focus on culture, and realized quickly that my love for storytelling, which I had always known growing up, that's what drew me to marketing in the first place.
mm,
It is very true for me, but similar to you, my heart and soul lies with people. There's nothing that
yeah,
brings me more joy than really learning someone and really like digging in and understanding who they are and what they're about, and to get to build this company where people really are at the center and do it in a way that feels authentic to you and to me. It's incredibly rewarding, and
mm,
definitely gives me a lot of hope that it's sort of meta, right? Like we're doing the thing that we are also hoping to
yeah,
help more people do for themselves. And
yeah,
I love when that comes together that way. It's just like it starts to really fuel itself. And
yeah.
yeah.
I absolutely, every day that I think about, when we get into the platform, we start thinking about things we want to provide our community, and it's just like, gosh, share everything we know, and then just like, wow, I kind of want to use that, right? It's like, how do we dog food? And like, I think there's so much uniqueness to that. Is like we are in the career ourselves, building
Mhm.
the thing that we're hoping guides us too. So
Mhm.
it's a fun place to be in when you can actually use the thing you're creating for other people too. So
Mhm. Totally. totally.
See.
Yeah, and I think the timing is also really interesting, right? I mean, when we get asked all the time, what prompted you guys to start Career Sandwich? What's the
Mhm.
genesis of this? And there's a lot of things I think, but timing, they always say timing is a huge part of the equation. And I think in our case, it definitely rings true. We're in May of 2024 right now, and the last 4 or 5 years have been a little wild for
Yeah,
obvious reasons.
yeah, yeah.
And looking back on the whole, the world has changed so much, right? But especially professional world. And a lot of those changes were happening well before the pandemic. A lot of those changes were sort of bubbling right under the surface. But 2020 hit, and the pandemic paired with just a lot of change in the industry. Like there's just things evolve, and things and the rate of change is faster than it's
Mm,
ever been.
mm,
So it's just we're operating and living in a world that didn't exist 5 years ago. But
mhm,
I remember at the beginning of our conversations when we were kind of kicking the can around what could we do in this space, having that realization that, man, the world has changed so much, and yet career support has not changed at all
mhm.
to
Yeah.
match the times. And it felt like there was
Mm,
just this big gaping hole. And every time
mhm.
we say this to folks, I feel like at least people just have this, they drop their shoulders and they're just sort of like, yes, I
Yeah.
feel like I'm doing all the right things. I feel like I'm checking all the boxes. I'm
Mm,
following the rules and playing
yeah,
by,
yeah.
I'm doing it right.
Mhm,
Why do I feel like I'm not getting anywhere? And
mhm,
and if I do feel like I'm getting somewhere, a lot of times it's not actually where I even want to be.
mm,
Um,
mhm. Yeah, yeah.
so
Yeah,
I don't,
yeah. I mean, I think that's the unique part of all this is like we're living in a time of change, and when there's change like this, the ground moves, and like we have the opportunity to kind of like come in and kind of fill these gaps. And I think this is a huge one. There's so much, innovation and like how companies are building things with AI that helps people get, their resumes written and all these things that are kind of contributing, I think, in some cases to the noise in the system for people who are out there applying for jobs. We have the economy that's always, that's not in our control. I guess you could say there's things that are in our control, things that aren't when it comes to our careers. And, I think right now there's just a lot of uncertainty and change everywhere you look. And people are like, what was working, like you said, was I'm doing the things I used to do. Why isn't it working?
Mhm.
And then I think, like you said, so many people that I talk to, when I tell them about like, they're like, oh, what are you doing these days? I'm like, oh, working on Career Sandwich. Like, tell me about that. And then I start getting into it and they look at me and they go, yeah, I don't know how I got here. I'm just doing the thing that I was doing. And I think that's like a really interesting is like we just let it go to chance, and
Mhm.
sometimes you get lucky and it works out, but
Mhm.
oftentimes it doesn't. So
Mhm.
um, I think the change, like you said, is real right now. And, hopefully we can create some, guardrails and like tools and resources and things to help people get pointed in the direction that they need to in a very different way. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a perfect bridge, like to, I think it's important that we spend a little bit of time today talking about kind of what is our mission at Career
mhm,
Sandwich,
mhm,
um, and what you just described is exactly the genesis and the tee up to our mission, right? We spent a good amount of time, locked in a room in the Cohatch in Dublin, trying to figure out like what are the words to articulate what it is we're trying to do here. And I think when we
mhm,
landed on our mission, which is empower people to build the career and life that they crave, there was something that really clicked.
mhm,
There's a sense of ownership there, empower people to build, not just
mhm.
kind of take the lazy river of a career
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and just end up where the current takes you. It's like, no, like think intentionally, where do you want to be
Mhm,
and how can we help you get there? And I really like that we baked the word crave in there because
mhm.
I think we've all had that feeling. I mean, it's
Yeah,
a little punny, which is
yeah.
always fun, a little
We have a
sandwich.
lot of those. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But I think the sensation of craving transcends just food, obviously.
Mhm.
There's
Yeah.
all sorts of things that we crave in our lives, but that sort of innate hunger for something and like, oh, I want that so
Mhm.
bad. I'm craving it.
Yeah.
We we're on the same page, which is why I love working with you and Julie as well,
Mm.
that
Mm.
that's that is an attainable North Star for
Mhm.
folks.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we've had the privilege of having those moments in our own career,
Mhm.
and I know plenty of other people who've had it as well. And rather than just hoping that that moment appears in your professional life,
Mhm.
really breaking down for folks, how can you put yourself in that position where you can build the career that you
Yeah.
crave, um,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
yourself? You really own it. And when you make that an attainable path for someone and help really show them the way, they just light up. They love
Yeah.
it. And like that's what we're doing here.
Yeah. No, I know when we hit on that word because we were trying to describe it, and we went through a bunch of, and then it was like, it's like yes, because we were all sitting there like you can feel that, you know what that feels like, and I think you know it's whether it's work life integration and you're looking for a place where like a company is like fits that perfectly, right? Like whatever you need, like someone's gonna crave something that there's a thing that they're gonna need in their career that you know drives them, like whether they need flexibility because things going on in their personal life. So like that's the piece that they're craving is flexibility, whatever that is.
Mhm.
I think when we hit it, like you said, you know it, and to be able to at least in my career to sit back and be able to sit here and go, yeah, I can think of every interaction, every milestone that brought me to this moment right here on this podcast with you,
Mhm.
is a very it's empowering. It makes you feel like you can go out there and do whatever, not whatever you want to do, but like go out and like build your, like truly like you said,
Mhm.
build your career, like and get what you deserve, and whether that's confidence so you can negotiate better, whether that's like getting clear on like, you know what, maybe I took this job or I got this degree and it really wasn't what I wanted it to do. Like there's so many reasons people like end up in these positions, and none of them are, no one's to blame in it, really. It's just kind of how we've been taught, and depending on when you were growing up, it was either A, you went to school and you stayed here until you got your promotion and da 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 da, da, and you just kind of moved through the ranks. But it's all different now,
Mhm.
and I think, we have a job to truly help people figure this out, because it goes beyond just individuals. It's kind of like the world needs this right now, I think, in a lot of ways too. So
Mhm. Yeah. I think the question I get most often after kind of explaining this idea to folks, we want to help you build the career that you crave. The number one question I get is, well, how are you going to do that? And it's a
yeah,
valid question. It's a valid
yeah,
question.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But I think we're really onto something with our kind of 3-point simple framework it's sort of the centerpiece of how we
mhm,
talk about the proactivity of building your own career. Like, what are the 3 essential steps in doing that? And I think
yeah,
we've, I think we've really, if I do say so myself, I think we've got it kind of figured out.
yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, and that's, before you jump into that, Shelby, and I think it's important
yeah.
for people to know that, like, we didn't land here, we didn't throw a dart, right? Like this has
Mm,
been, I don't want to know how many hours have you spent, I mean, talking with people, coaching people, and doing this work to get to this place where like this 3-part framework is really built into true like interactions and true moments of like us coming back to the drawing board and being like, you know what, maybe this is where, this is
mm,
what this represents. And when we hit on this, I was like, finally, we finally can put some guardrails around and framing around the things we're trying to say, because it is very like, yeah, build a career. Okay, how? Like,
oh, totally.
like, so I mean, I think it's important for people to know that, like, when we started off on this journey, it was one thing, to where we are today, it's one thing. But the thing that has maintained consistency is our ability to go out there stay accessible to as many people as we can,
Mhm.
which is a big part of our mission, is to not just reserve this stuff for people who can afford big career coaching contracts, but truly like as many people as we can.
Mhm.
And to learn with them and build this and adapt this as we continue to learn more in this time of change. Cause that's, I don't think anybody has it figured out, but I think we are getting closer to understanding, okay, what do people need right now in this market? So
Mhm. Yeah, no, totally. Well, in that spirit, I mean, should we talk about those three pillars?
absolutely. I feel like this maybe, well, other than the conversations we've had with, this is probably the first time we're going very broad with this. Like this to me feels like we're launching kind of this new stuff that we've been working on for a long time. So I'm excited to
Yeah.
get it out there in this format. So
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been in our practice. This is the
mhm,
framework that I use with every client that I chat with. And of course, we're like baking it into the platform itself and building
mhm,
resources and things around it. But I do think that, the more that we talk about it and the more that we kind of normalize these three pillars and make this part of people's ongoing personal and professional development, the better.
yep, yep,
But
totally.
so like high level, I mean, we can like click into each of these because I think they are different and but together is where the magic happens.
Yeah.
How do people build the career and life they crave? I mean, we've basically boiled it down to three things. Like first, folks really have to know themselves. Second, they have to know how to build their path. And third, they have to stay organized. So I'll kind of like give a high level of each of these three things, chime in if I'm like
Mhm,
missing anything or you think there's
yeah.
anything else like the audience should know. But know yourself kind of speaks for itself, right? You have to know what matters most to you, what motivates you, what kind of environment do you thrive in, what sort of thing, what do you love, what do you hate, what do you never want to do again, what are you
Mhm,
interested in? All of that stuff requires a level of intentionality and self-reflection that many of us, not on purpose, but just sort of have stopped doing, especially as we kind of get further along in our careers, our lives get really
mhm,
busy, and the easiest thing to ignore is ourselves often enough. And
yeah.
we are being really intentional with all things in Career Sandwich of trying to pull people back to that state of really knowing themselves and knowing what matters most to them and what makes them them, because
Mhm,
we believe that that's the foundation of everything. If you don't know yourself, then you will never be able to know whether or not a career is right for you or if you're on the right path or the wrong path, because you have nothing
mhm,
to like gut check against, right? You have to
mhm,
have that internal compass really dialed in and really calibrated.
yeah.
So that's a huge part of what we do in our coaching calls. Obviously, it's a big part of what we're baking into the product. And I
Yeah.
sort of it's very intentionally the first of the three because you can't do anything else unless you know
Yeah.
yourself first.
Yeah, and we hear this even from like a very tactical conversations, like when we talk with our recruiter friends, and they'll even say like, I don't know how people can even go into an interview or negotiate a salary without knowing themselves, like knowing like. So I mean, this is like baked into like all of that, I mean, that just the simplicity of understanding what's going to work, what's not going to work for you drives those other conversations you have, right? Like it's gone like just working remotely. I want flexible isn't going to, it's not going to work. And there's a lot more to why you need to do that, right? And we can get into this whole storytelling piece of this too. If
Mhm.
but I think there's a lot to just getting to, like you said, back to that place of like what do I need? What don't I need? Prioritizing that so that you can guide the path, right? So
Mhm.
yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's funny that you started to move down that storytelling path. That's where my mind was going to, but that's like a
Oh,
whole
cool.
separate conversation.
Yeah,
Like,
for sure. Yeah.
oh my gosh. But
Next
it's,
episode. Next episode.
yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
What does it mean to have a personal career story? But
Yep.
um, so second is of course build your path. Again, chose those words with intentionality. I think build implies proactivity, similar to our mission statement. This is
Mhm.
very much something where We want people to be in the driver's seat. You know, your career is not going to happen to you. You need to create it for yourself. So
Mhm.
chose that word on purpose. And then I really like path versus like a destination or an end game or even job.
Mhm.
We share the perspective that no one job should ever be the goal, right? Your career
Mhm. Yep.
is a pendulum and a journey.
Mhm.
And so building your path is something that feels right to us for so many reasons.
Mhm.
It also just really embodies the sort of fundamental beliefs and philosophies that we have in terms of
Mhm.
what does a really great career for someone look like.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the one that I feel a lot of people try to get answered for them a lot of times. Like inside a company, you hear this one a lot. It's like, well, what's next for me here? It's like,
Hmm.
what's my path? Or, I just joined the startup, for example, or I've been in this role for a long time. Like, I mean, sure, some companies have some structure to help guide you in, but like generally speaking, like that comes back to that empowerment. Like it's up to you to really drive that with your managers so they can help tee you up and put you in those positions. So, this is, totally a space that I think is where folks kind of get tripped up and they're just waiting for somebody to like move them to that next place in their journey. And I think, that linear aspect, like, I think a lot of people can sort of appreciate, okay, yeah, careers aren't as linear, but I think there is some work that needs to be done around consistency. And like, you mentioned your journey to being into people, mine's into, I mean, it's, but I don't feel like I've pivoted into a place I should, it's like there's a
Mm-hmm.
very clear like flow, I guess, to
Yeah.
where I am, so I can still build on my experiences and my skill sets, but not, I don't know how to, it's not like there's not huge pivots, right? They're evolutions. It's almost like an evolution, to say
Hmm.
that a pivot isn't what somebody may need, but
Yeah.
um, I think when you have that path, it makes it a little easier for you to go, oh, well, yeah, this feels a little bit off of what I was doing, but if I
Hmm.
look forward another 5 years, like it comes back around and you can kind of see the tie. So,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, you know me. I think there's always a tie. It's a phrase I use all the time when I'm
yeah,
coaching
yeah.
folks is like make your story make sense to people. And
Hmm.
so many people, like the huge majority of people that I talk to, don't have never thought about the sum of their experiences that way. And so oftentimes they say, like, well, I did X, Y, and Z, I did A, B, and C, and I did one, two, and three. And I just sort of, that's sort of how they talk about it. They just factually say, this is
Oh,
what I've
wow. Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
And in
Mm.
reality, when we talk about this idea of building your path, a fundamental part of that is talking about the path that you've been on previously. And to your point, like pulling that invisible string through all of your experiences in a way that
Yeah.
tells a compelling story and gives not only yourself but anyone that you're talking to this confidence that like you got here on purpose, right? You didn't
Yes.
you
Yeah.
didn't stumble your way here. You didn't
Yeah.
just like trip and be like, oh, here I am. And
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe some of us
Yeah.
do feel like we kind of stumbled into this career that we have, and that's okay. But there is always a thread, and
Hmm.
it's like I
Hmm.
feel like a detective when I'm chatting with folks trying
Yeah.
to like I will find the thread for you.
Yeah.
And when we find it, it's just such a magical moment because it gives people such a stronger sense of the blueprint for their future path. Like, oh,
Yes.
if
Yeah.
that's my storyline from the first part of my career, I can continue that on or change it or whatever, but you have something to ground yourself in. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm gonna ask you because I'm with you. I love these threads and like, when you debrief, some of these stories, like, obviously you keep things very, very anonymous as you should, and you respect people's privacy. But when I hear things like we figured out this thread and then you explain a thread, and I'm just, gosh, it's such a cool moment. But
Mhm.
I'm curious, like, how many of these threads kind of draw back even beyond before they started their career.
Oh, so many,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
many.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
'Cause,
it's,
I mean, it's that who you are thing, right? It's that goes back to
yeah.
bullet one. Like you lose that over time, right? Like we just start to go from who we are to who our like who our,
Mm.
work personas are, and we have to take all that jargon out. And like you talk a lot about like weekend language and like all these things that make your story. And I think the more that we can lean on that, that it's a heck of a lot more interesting than you, like you said, than the bullet points.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
yeah. And I think, if you look at those first two, so know yourself, like who you really are, and then build your path is like a key ingredient of that build your path is knowing that story and being able to talk about that so that you can continue marching in whatever direction you want to going forward. Um, those things like that's not just a what you've done. It's a
mhm.
who you are. And
Yeah.
we've, to your point, I think lost that, right? I think in
Mhm.
so many people's professional lives, they, by no fault of anybody, like that's not at all the
Mhm.
point of what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say here, but they've kind of been reduced to the bullet points on their resume. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that's that's a crummy feeling.
Yeah.
Like I know people who have sent, not exaggerating,
Mm.
hundreds of job applications in, hundreds, and
Mhm.
maybe have landed an interview or two, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, people are tough and like, yeah, they understand that it's like just a wild market out there, but I don't believe for a second that that doesn't slowly like start to influences someone internal, like their
Mhm.
self-talk. Like that
I'm
will,
sure. I'm sure.
that'll
Yeah.
that'll wear on you. And even the most resilient people on planet Earth, like we're not meant to be reduced to a piece of paper. Now,
Mhm.
is this me saying like throw away your resume and like never
Yeah.
like no, like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, it serves a purpose, but
Yeah.
I think what really excites me about what we're doing is
Mm.
we're really trying to get back to the like not just what you've done, but like who you really are and
Yeah.
helping you
Yeah.
have that confidence to bring that to the table because that's what people remember and that's what people want on their
Mhm.
team. They want people who are confident in who they are and have a perspective on where they want to go next, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and that's
Yeah.
how you break through, honestly, right? I couldn't
Yeah.
rattle off 4 bullet points on my own resume, let alone someone else's, but I could
Yeah.
tell you my story and I could tell you
Yeah.
your story because
Yeah.
that's what we love as humans is
Yeah.
we love
It's
stories.
it's so it's such a big, like, I think people are starting to feel it because I was actually chatting with somebody a few weeks back who literally said, I'm working with a company who's like helping me build my resume. And like literally it's like I feel like I'm building this for some sort of algorithm.
Mhm.
And I think like that was like you could see like how I know I have to do this thing. I have to play this
Yeah.
part, right? But in reality, like that's not who I am, you know?
Yeah.
And it was almost like my eyes just kind of was like, wow, like we've got to this
Yeah.
place where, and then I think about, my eyes kind of got big when you were explaining this. Like I think when you said, oh, we're not saying throw away the resume, it's like, well, no. And I think about branding and personal branding. And this is another, not to get too far away from what we're talking about, but you know, I think if we could get to a place where you view these moments as touch points in your brand and your story, and like,
Mhm.
it makes the resume super valid. Yes, you probably need to have a bulleted, like a piece there, kind of cliff notes of who you are and what you do. But, to say this is the only time you're going to get my entire story is
Mhm.
just not, it's not fair because it's not how much of anything works, right? Like
Yeah.
great brands are built up over time, stories in general are things that kind of come over time. So it's definitely, I'm again, I'm very excited about kind of pushing through and trying to break through this norm, or even just providing other vehicles and ways for people to do this, right? Like,
Mhm.
yeah, we're not here to change the way, certain things have been done. I mean, it's bigger than who we are. I mean, but I
Mhm.
think there's definitely ways we can influence and help people, get discovered,
Mhm.
differently than going through the emotional drain of applying for 100 jobs at a time.
Totally.
Like I couldn't imagine that. Like
Yeah.
that
And
would be really tough,
yeah,
especially if you're getting ghosted and all the stuff we
oh
hear.
gosh,
Like,
some of the stories that I've heard from folks
mhm,
is it, yeah, it's just like
yeah.
it's incredibly frustrating. And
Mhm,
everyone, the amount of graciousness that people still bring despite being ghosted, despite the
mhm,
total, I'll just say it, like crap that a lot of companies and put
mhm,
people through these days is mind blowing to me. Like the fact that people continue to like show up and they keep going, and
yeah,
it's remarkable. And it's a
yeah.
huge testament to, that inner strength that everyone has. And
Mhm,
it also is, it makes me really excited because it's like, okay, you still have like the energy, like there's it goes back to the crave, right? They're
yeah,
still
yeah.
like
Yeah.
craving. When you have that hunger for something that
Mm,
you want to get somewhere, you don't give
yeah.
up. And I see the huge majority of people, operating that way. But
Mhm,
yeah, I think just like getting really strategic and helping make sure that they're
mhm,
spending their energy in the best ways so that they are
yeah,
getting the most sort of bang for their
I agree. Yeah.
yeah.
It'd be interesting in the future to, unpack kind of like, because we've been on both sides of the table, right? And some of this stuff. So like,
Mhm.
it's, I mean, both very like naturally empathetic individuals. So it's like you know, I, eh, it's hard to blame one side or the other in the world we're in, right? Because it's very weird. It's very complex. It's very, I don't know what, like, there's a lot going on right now in the market that I think, or the job market that is causing some of this, but at the same time, there are things that companies could be doing better, and there's things that individuals could be doing better. One of the things that we hear a lot is, the more you just keep spamming these
Mhm.
jobs, like you're adding more noise into the system,
Yeah.
going back to getting super clear. So I think that's probably a whole nother topic we should just talk about more. But, I do think, like you said, it's all going to come back to who are you, getting very clear, putting the detective hat on and figuring out like,
Mhm.
okay, what do I need to do to get to here,
Yeah.
and starting to build that path around it. So,
Yeah.
um,
Well, I think that's a perfect segue to like that last pillar, so P0 is of course know yourself, build the skills to build your path, but then how do you make sure that that those two things don't just become a flash in the pan? It's that
yeah.
staying organized and really staying focused on what it is, where it
Mhm.
is you're trying to go, what's really important to you, and not, to your point, just throwing spaghetti at a wall and applying for
Yep.
anything and everything, because that doesn't serve you, right?
Yep. Yep.
Um, and a lot of people, I think, out of they really just want to break through in some way, shape, or form. And so a lot of folks, when I ask them, I'm like, why are you doing that? Like you don't want to do that role, like,
Mm.
and every single time it comes back to this just like sense of exacerbation. They're just like, I'm just trying to break through. I just need
Mhm.
something. And so I don't blame them at all. Like I totally get
Yeah.
it. But when we think about the stay organized part of the career sandwich ecosystem, it's definitely that checks and balance. Like, are you investing your time and your energy into the things that actually help you get to know yourself better and continue to know
Mhm.
yourself, and then
Mhm.
proactively build your path in your way? So
Yep.
it's this sort of trifecta of three things that they all have to
Yep.
be done sort of in tandem.
Yep.
And just leaning into one of the three parts of this framework isn't going to get someone where they want to be. It really is like it is a three-legged stool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so much that we even talk about, and it seems so like counterintuitive, but in a market, like we're in, but like, just literally like part of the work we do is to help slow somebody down,
Mm-hmm.
because like, you know, yeah, there's a lot of things that happen in that moment that you maybe let go out of an organization. And there's a reality that certain things need to be met. Like the foundation needs to be set. You need insurance, you need these things. But there's also, that panic applying, as I like to think about
Mm-hmm.
it, like that, like I think that's just a natural reflex for somebody who's high performing to like say, I'm going to go and solve this and I'm just going to do that. But eventually, I don't want to get it, but there's a definition of insanity, right? There's a lot of things to kind of look at and say, like, maybe I just need to slow down a little bit,
Mhm.
regroup, get organized, really kind of go through this, we have like the 14-day refresh. There's a lot of things we do to help you do this, but,
Yeah.
and really start to work towards, what does, how do I get back to that place, right? And you'll get there,
Mm.
and I think you're going to get there sooner than if you just started throwing darts at the wall. And, I think I think when I think of craving, like, yeah, you could be craving just getting back to work, and that's
Yeah.
okay. Like, get it, like that's reality. And,
Yeah.
but knowing who your network is and putting some time into that, getting that all cleaned up and like really investing in those pieces,
Mm.
don't be afraid to like truly have conversations with your closest network and say like, hey, this just happened to me. Like,
Mhm.
but to have that conversation about, hey, this just happened to me, they're going to say, well, how can I help? And if
Mhm.
you can't get clear on like what you need
Yeah,
from them,
totally.
you're they're not able to help you, right? So I think you have to slow down. You have to just sort of like revisit it all. And depending, I think, how long you've been out of, you've been working and then you're in this position, like I haven't interviewed in 8 years or whatever it is, like you may
Mhm.
have to take a little bit more time, right? Because
Totally.
truly dusting off the resume,
Totally.
figuring out your story. So all that stuff is, very, very important, I think,
Yeah,
to the success of getting to that crave state in a job, right?
totally. And I think that's one of the most exciting parts for me about this platform and us playing in this podcast space is that, because we're having so many conversations with people who are in it right now, whether they're, trying to figure out if they want to stay at their company, but they're feeling a little stalled out, or maybe they were
Mm.
let go, or maybe they, mutually separated, whatever it may be. There's 10 million different circumstances in which someone could be trying to figure out, like, where do I go from here? What do I want to
Mhm.
do?
Yep.
But because we're having so many of those conversations, like I'm really, really excited about this idea of taking all those themes and like being able to talk about them here. So
Yeah.
even if
Yes.
you're, if you're say that I haven't interviewed in 8 years, like, right? Like I don't want people to feel alone in those moments. And
Hmm.
we can talk about what it's actually like out there because we have the real anecdotes and
Yeah.
the real, um, you
Yeah.
know, we have I don't want to call it data, but it is data, but
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Inputs. It's the inputs, right? It's
inputs,
it's
yeah.
the things that we can kind of draw on, and it's generally
And it's
pretty
real
fresh
life.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's
It's
like
like
in the
what people
moment.
are actually living and
Hmm.
experiencing. Like these
Hmm.
are real humans living in the
Yep.
real world in May of
Yep.
2024.
Yep.
This isn't like, some philosophical whatever, or
Hmm.
just like pontificating about what things should or shouldn't be.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is
Yeah.
real life. This is what
Yeah.
it's actually
Yeah.
like out right in the world
Yeah.
right now. And
Yeah.
being able to have conversations about that
And,
feels really refreshing.
yeah, and I know when we talked about, that like our whole brand and just this podcast in general, that was one of the things we talked about is, how do we show up? What is our tone? And I think, there's a whole slew of and topics and people talking about work-life balance. And there's a whole lot of things in this space that sometimes I think could be seen as just people like, you know, screaming to the masses. And,
Mhm. Mhm.
one thing I think folks should just I think hopefully folks get out of this is that we are trying to build this into actionable things, right? Not just here's what we believe, but here's what we believe plus an example of it plus what you can apply. And then also know that we have people on both sides of this conversation, right? Like we're talking every day with companies who do want to do it right, right? Who do want to support folks who aren't trying to just, you know, view individuals as numbers, right? So I mean, we get to see it from both sides of the table, I guess. And it's really interesting to have some really interesting, innovative conversations with some of our accounts. I mean, I know you and I are really excited about one in particularly that like I'm continuingly just jazzed to know that like what can come from that, because I think it is the next big shift, I think, to how companies should be thinking about
Mhm.
careers. So
Yeah.
um so yeah, I'm with you. I think, we have it's a great medium. I think we're going to go into a lot of different topics, and
Yeah.
I hope we do, right? Like I hope we
No.
go deep into I hope we can bring on guests that want to go deep on topics with
Yeah.
us,
Yeah.
and but it's there's a lot, there's so much to be learned still, and there's so much moving parts and pieces, so everything's real time. So
Totally. Yeah. Well, I think that's like a good thing for us to actually get really clear on. I think I agree completely with all of those hopes for this podcast and
yeah,
like everything that you're excited about as well. But in the spirit of kind of living up to our own values, like I think it's probably important to name just a few things about what is this podcast really going to be? What do we want it to be?
yeah,
And what
yeah,
can people expect from us?
yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
I think for me personally, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this, but like when I think about what I want people to know about me coming into this space, building relationships, whether it's virtually, face to face over Zoom, whatever it may be, but, as we start to just like really expand and get to know more people, like I mean it when I say, like, I am so committed to helping people get where they want to be. Like
Mhm.
it matters more to me than the words themselves could ever say. It's what
Yeah.
lights me up. It's what gives me purpose. Like I could talk about this stuff and do this every single minute of every day. Like
Mhm.
I love it. I really, really do because I think there's nothing more satisfying than watching people take back their own power and like regain a really confident like sense of ownership and control of their own
Mhm.
lives and
Mhm.
professionally and personally. And I think just where we're at in the world right now, like
Yeah.
we need more people who feel that level of innate confidence and like
Mhm.
I'm where I want to be and it's on purpose. And
Yeah.
so I think if that's my commitment. Like that's
Yeah.
anyone watching
Yeah.
or listening to this, like you would like I almost want to like look into the camera. Like you have my word. Like I
Fuck.
care so much. So much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you do, that's the thing, like you naturally do. It's if you get to spend any time with you and just kind of talking about I mean, you're so good at just being that listener and just being able to just open and just help people have those quick little like, oh yeah, build that confidence over time. So I mean, it's naturally you, and I think that's what makes everything we're doing so authentic and real and honest and like you said, real, right? Like we aren't like these are things that like truly are baked into a lot of what we've done for ourselves, but just who we are as individuals, right? So like you, I mean, I found my way into the people team, I think naturally because I'm very empathetic and a people person, right? And I really love seeing people get to success, right? So a lot of that time was spent inside a company and helping building programs to, help people get to whatever that version of a win was for them quicker than just figuring it out through osmosis. But, I think generally, when you I've done a lot of things that I've worked for companies, I've worked for myself, like you realize like if you can do it for if when you build that level of confidence, you go like, you know what? I could do anything I want to do. Right?
Mhm.
Like that empowerment. Like I mean, sure, and I say that with like truly there's like we all have constraints, right? But I think that's also the best thing about design in general is like how do you design stuff around a constraint? That's the
Mhm.
best ideas come from that. But that true embodiment of I'm in control,
Mhm.
right? And I can do this. I know I can, and I will do it. And some of those that could be a big risk where you go off and build the next big change in our world that we see and we live in every day, right? And I think to your point, seeing people just kind of hold all that stuff back
Mhm.
in the spirit of like confusion, lost, whatever that is,
Fear,
it's hard.
like all super
Fear.
normal.
Oh
Yeah,
gosh, yeah, all very, yeah, and like very, very normal. And anything, anything. I mean, everything's there's a fear to everything.
totally.
But there's a lot of truth to just owning yourself, and that means owning. Well, you say it a lot. It's our truth. Like own. And that truth.
There is
You
no
know,
wrong answer if it's
yeah,
what is
yeah.
right for you. Like,
For sure. At that given time too, right? Like
yeah,
for some that may be like, hey, I can't go out and do my big endeavor that I hope one day I can. Yeah, you may not be able to right now because you're handling the thing that needs to be handled that allows you
perfect.
to do that in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
So I think it's super it's super exciting. I think most people just need the support. They need there's some of the resources. They need they need the ability to feel a sense of like inspiration to say like, well, that person's just like me and they did it.
Mhm.
But also know like we're not gonna give you just the end result here. I think
Yeah.
the idea of Careers Unwrapped is to
Yeah.
show people that this is still work. I mean, you have to show up every day and be
Yeah.
working on your career. It's not a like you said, it's not just there's no done state here, right?
Yeah.
I think that's important too, is this, you know, I've heard people go through some crazy journeys, but they got there, and those are the great stories, you
Mm.
know. Um,
Mhm.
so
Totally. Well, do you want to anything that we want to share on like the platform or sort of like expectations on timing of this podcast?
yeah. I mean, I think just for people to know that, a lot of what we're doing right now is really starting to like relaunch and rebreed these three kind of
Mhm.
pillars to the masses in very different ways, right? A lot of the work has been through helping our business accounts with transition support and practicing these and learning from this stuff in those environments, but now like being able to open this up more broadly to anyone that comes with the full platform that is really designed around these
Yeah.
principles. There's also some really cool stuff we've been launching. We have our BLT newsletter coming out, which is a
Hmm.
great goes back to that belief that we talked about, and actionable tips every week or so that'll help you make progress towards it, right? And I think we're always trying to give this stuff away. I think we probably would give it all away if we could.
I know,
But
we
when
literally would. Yeah.
yeah, but when we can, we will. When we can't, that's where you'll find it in the platform. But I would say just keep following along with us. Like follow along in this podcast. Follow along with us on LinkedIn. We post a lot there. And then, we're co-creating this together, right? Like this is episode one,
Yeah.
hopefully of many. And I think we're going to be soliciting for ideas and topics. And I think we learn by working truly closely with everyone that we get to encounter. So try not to
Yeah.
do this stuff in a vacuum. So
Totally. Yeah. I think that's the center of everything. So,
yep.
echo everything that you just shared. And, to anyone listening, like consider this equal parts like a commitment from us to make this as open and inclusive of a space as possible,
Mhm.
because there really is no abnormal anymore. Like, like
Yeah.
everyone's experience is there's a lot of similarities, but obviously like everyone's on their own journey and like every path is
Mhm.
valid, and kind of celebrating that and creating the space for that is something that really matters to us. And we hope that
Yeah.
this can be a place that we can do that. And then the second part of this is, obviously that commitment, but then also just an open invitation to anyone listening, like Dennis said, like join us in the community LinkedIn, visit us careersandwich.com, but also you know, we're just humans too, right? Like shoot
Yeah,
us a
yeah,
DM and like
yeah,
you have
yeah,
an idea, you want to talk about something, like you want us to talk about something or dive into a topic, like please,
yeah,
be a part of the
yeah,
conversation because that's what makes it as impactful and meaningful and valuable as possible. So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Cool.
awesome.
Awesome.
Well, I think, I think let's wrap up episode 1. This was so fun,
Wrap
Dan.
it up. It is. It's gonna be great. I really am excited. So
Me too. Me too.
awesome.
Well,
Cool.
yeah, I appreciate the talk and thank you again
Yeah.
to everyone
Yeah.
listening. It's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.